I still remember the exact moment my phone buzzed. It wasn't the sound that stayed with me. It was the silence that followed. 3 dots, then nothing. Then the message appeared. This event is professionals only. We'll call you after. I read it once, then again, and again, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that didn't feel like a door quietly shutting in my face. But they didn't. And what hurt the most wasn't the message. It was who sent it. My name doesn't matter. Not really. What matters is the years I gave, and the way everything I thought I built slipped through my hands without a single warning. I wasn't always on the outside. In fact, for most of my life, I was the one holding everything together, especially for him, my son, Daniel. Daniel was born on a cold morning, the kind where the air feels sharp enough to cut through bone. I remember holding him for the first time, wrapped in that thin hospital blanket thinking, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. And I did, or at least I tried. I worked long hours, missed sleep, skipped meals. I wasn't perfect, but I showed up. Every single time. School events, late-night fevers, broken toys that felt like the end of the world to him. I was there. When he was 10, he told me he wanted to build something big someday. I laughed and asked him what that meant. He said, something people respect. I didn't realize back then how much that word would come back to haunt me. Respect. As he got older, Daniel became distant, not cold, not unkind, just somewhere else. Always thinking, always planning. He had this way of looking at the world, like it was a puzzle he could solve, if he just stared long enough, and I admired that. I really did. I supported him through everything, his studies, his ideas, his early failures that he tried to hide behind forced confidence. I remember the first time he came to me with his business plan. He was nervous, though he tried to act like he wasn't. He placed the papers on the table and said, I think this could work. I didn't fully understand it. If I'm honest, parts of it went over my head, but I saw the way his hands trembled slightly, the way his voice tightened at the edges. So I said yes, not because I was sure, but because I believed in him. We built it together, or at least, that's what I thought. Long nights at the kitchen table turned into meetings. Meetings turned into small wins. Small wins turned into something that started to grow faster than either of us expected. There were moments I'll never forget. The first client who said yes. The first payment that felt real. The first time Daniel smiled without hesitation and said, we're actually doing this. Those moments, they meant everything to me, because it wasn't just about the business, it was about us. But somewhere along the way, things began to shift. At first it was small. He started taking calls in another room. Said it was just easier to focus. Then came the new faces. People I didn't know. People who spoke faster, dressed sharper, and carried themselves like they belonged in a world I wasn't quite part of. Daniel started using words I hadn't heard from him before. Scaling. Positioning. Professional standards. I tried to keep up. I really did. But sometimes when he spoke, I felt like I was listening from the other side of a glass wall, close enough to see, but not close enough to understand. Still, I trusted him. That never changed. If anything, I trusted him more, because he was my son. And I thought, no matter how far things went, no matter how big it all became, he would never forget where it started, who stood beside him when there was nothing. Then came the invitation. A major event, the kind that could change everything. Investors, partners, people who could take the business to another level. Daniel mentioned it casually at first, like it was just another step, but I could see it meant more. His eyes had that same look they used to have when he was younger. Focused, determined, almost restless. I told him I was proud of him. He nodded, smiled faintly. But something about it felt distant, like the smile didn't quite reach where it used to. A few days before the event, I asked him what time we should leave. There was a pause, just a second too long. Then he said, I'll let you know. Things are still being finalized. I didn't think much of it. At least, not then. The night before, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because I was excited. For him. For us. I kept thinking about how far we'd come. All those late nights. All those moments where quitting would have been easier. But we didn't. I even took out the old folder, the one with his first business plan. The creases were still there, the ink slightly faded. I ran my fingers over the pages and smiled. We made it, I thought. The next morning, I got ready earlier than I needed to, pressed my shirt twice, checked my watch more times than I can count. I didn't want to be late. Not for something like this. Then my phone buzzed. That message. Short, clean, careful. This event is professionals only. We'll call you after. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he sent it to the wrong person. Maybe there was more coming. So I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, nothing. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Professionals only. The words echoed in my head louder each time. What did that make me? After everything? I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. I didn't want to sound emotional. I didn't want to sound confused. But I was both. Finally, I wrote, Did you mean to send this to me? The reply came quicker this time. Too quick. Like it had already been prepared. Yes, it's just better this way. I'll explain later. Better. That word again. Always clean, always calm, always distant. I sat there for a long time after that. The room felt quieter than it should have been, like something had shifted, but I couldn't see it yet, only feel it. And that's when I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't a mistake. This had been building, in the pauses, in the closed doors, in the conversations I was no longer part of. I looked at the old folder on the table, then back at my phone, and for the first time, a question formed that I wasn't ready to answer. When did I stop being part of this? My thumb hovered over my contacts. There was one name I hadn't thought about in years. One person who had seen the very beginning, before any of this existed. Before Daniel changed. Before I did. I hesitated. Because deep down, I knew something. If I made that call, things wouldn't stay the same. Not for me. Not for him. The phone felt heavier in my hand as I finally pressed the screen. And as it started to ring, I realized this wasn't just about being left out. It was about something much deeper. Something I had missed. Something that was only just beginning to surface. And when the call connected, I said the one thing I never thought I'd have to say. I think I was wrong about my own son. The line stayed quiet for a moment after I said it. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels like someone is choosing their words carefully. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years finally answered. I was wondering when you'd call. It was Michael. If you had asked me years ago who Michael was, I would have said he was the kind of friend you don't find twice in a lifetime. We met long before Daniel's business idea, before the late nights, before the plans, before everything started to grow, back when life was simpler, back when trust felt uncomplicated. Michael and I had worked together once, built something small that never quite took off, but we stayed close even after it ended. He was there when Daniel was still a kid running around the house, asking 1,000 questions a minute, and for a while, he was part of our world, until he wasn't. We haven't spoken in a long time, I said, my voice tighter than I expected. No, he replied calmly. We haven't. There was no bitterness in his tone, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite place. I need to ask you something, I said. Another pause. Then, about Daniel? That caught me off guard. Yes. Michael let out a slow breath like he had been expecting this moment. I didn't want to be right about this, he said quietly. A cold weight settled in my chest. What do you mean? I asked. Instead of answering directly, he said, Tell me what happened. So I did. The message. The event. The way everything had been changing, piece by piece without me fully realizing it. I told him more than I expected to, about the distance, the new people, the feeling that I had somehow fallen behind in a life I helped build. When I finished, the silence came back, heavier this time. Then Michael spoke. Do you remember the last time we worked together? Of course I do. Do you remember why I stepped away? I frowned slightly, even though he couldn't see me. You said it wasn't the right time, that things were moving too fast. That's what I told you, he said. The way he emphasized it made my stomach tighten. What are you saying? I'm saying, Michael continued slowly, that Daniel came to me before he ever came to you. My grip on the phone tightened. That doesn't make sense, I said quickly. He brought the idea to me first. I was there. You were there when he needed support, Michael interrupted gently. But I was there when he was figuring out how far he could take it. I didn't respond, because part of me already knew. There was more. He asked me questions, Michael went on. Not about building something meaningful, but about control. About ownership. About how to structure things so that, later on, decisions wouldn't be complicated. A quiet ringing filled my ears. I told him, Michael said, that if he was going to build something with people he trusted, he should keep it honest, clear, fair. And, I asked, my voice barely steady, and he didn't like that answer. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had shifted just slightly closer. I stepped away because I didn't like where his thinking was going. Michael continued. Not because it was wrong, but because it was calculated. Calculated. That word didn't fit the Daniel I knew, or at least the Daniel I thought I knew. You're telling me, I said slowly, that this was planned? I'm telling you, Michael replied carefully, that Daniel always knew what he wanted. The question is, did you? I leaned back in my chair, staring at nothing. Memories started replaying in my mind. The business plan, the meetings, the way certain decisions were explained quickly, too quickly for me to fully question. The documents I signed without hesitation, because I trusted him, because he was my son. There were papers, I said suddenly. Early on, he said they were just formalities. Michael didn't answer right away. And that silence told me everything. You should take another look at those, he finally said. My chest tightened. I don't have copies, I admitted. You might not need them, Michael replied. Just ask yourself one thing. What? Since the beginning? Whose name was on everything? I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out, because for the first time, I wasn't sure. The conversation ended not long after that, not because there was nothing left to say, but because there was too much. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, the phone still in my hand, the room still quiet, but everything felt different now, not broken, not yet, but rearranged, like I had been looking at the same picture for years and only now noticed what was missing. Slowly, I stood up and walked over to the cabinet. The old folder was still there, right where I left it. I opened it again, my hands less steady this time. The same papers, the same faded ink, the same beginning. But now, I wasn't looking at them the same way. I wasn't seeing effort, or hope, or even pride. I was looking for something else. Anything that would tell me I hadn't misunderstood everything. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I did. It was Daniel. For a brief moment, something in my chest lifted. Maybe this was it. Maybe he would explain. Maybe there was something I had missed. Something simple. Something fixable. I opened the message. Event went well. Busy right now. We'll talk later. That was it. No explanation. No acknowledgement. Nothing. I stared at the screen, waiting for more. But there was nothing else. And that's when it finally settled in. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, like something sinking beneath the surface. This wasn't about one message, or one event. This was about distance that had been growing for a long time, hidden behind progress, buried under success, and protected by my own refusal to question it. I closed the folder gently and placed it back, exactly where it had been, because now I understood something I hadn't before. I hadn't just been left out of an event. I had been moved aside. Not loudly, not suddenly, but carefully. And the hardest part wasn't what I had lost. It was realizing he never thought I would notice. I looked at my phone one last time, at his message, at the space where something more should have been. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel confusion. I felt clarity. The kind that doesn't come with noise. The kind that comes when you finally see someone, exactly as they are. And as I set the phone down, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't chase answers anymore, because whatever came next wouldn't be about asking. It would be about understanding what I was truly standing on all along, and whether it had ever really been mine